If you're scared about AI, right? Just think about this logically for a moment. If you're scared about AI, no matter what, this is going to happen. So who do you want to have control of that, right? Would you rather have China be in control of that? Would you rather have Russia be in control of that? Would you rather have them be the leaders, right? Let's go back to the 1940s. Let's talk about the Manhattan Project. Would you have rather had the United States be in control of that, or would you rather have had Germany be in control of that, or somebody else in those days, right? You got to think about these things, because I can tell you it'd be a very different world if the U.S. was not, let's just call it, in the leadership position when it came to that, right? And so these are all things you have to consider in, from all different angles, right? And if you really think AI is any sort of danger, then some country is going to lead in AI. It's going to happen no matter what. Who do you want to be the leader? That's the big question, right? And so I just think that's food for thought that everybody has to consider out there, because if it's not us, it will be somebody else. If you're going to trust AI to make decisions for you, basically, right, you need to be 100% confident that that's the right decision to make, right? Like you were saying about like a cancer research or something like that, right? Or just think about any decision for your business. You have to be able to trust that that is absolutely the best decision. If you can't trust that, then I don't want to say there's no point in having it, but then it's just a glorified way of kind of looking at data, I guess you can say, right? You've got to be able to see these models. It's got to be able to spit you out something and say, we need to do this. And you've got to be able to trust that that's the right decision for your business. If you can't trust it, right, it's no different than if you have somebody there's somebody in place that makes decisions for organizations, right? Let's say your chief operating officer, your COO, is the one that makes XYZ decision, right? And let's say you can't trust them making decisions, then, what do you have them in that place for? They serve no purpose at that point in time, right? You've got to be able to trust that they make the right decision. No different than with AI in this, proliferation of AI over this next 5-10 years. You've got to be able to trust that as a government entity or just a corporation in general. You've got to be able to trust what it's telling you to do. A real opportunity I see in this market right now is Cheesecake Factory. This stock I just started buying recently, and I really want to add to this as a very big position. Cheesecake Factory, as far as the stock price, it's in a bad place. Bad place. That's the best way I can put it. But in regards to this, right, the way I kind of view this, right, is this stock. This is like the last 10 years of Cheesecake Factory stock. It's usually a stock anywhere between $30-ish and $60-something. And the way I kind of view this was obviously the worst case scenario for Cheesecake Factory stock when it fell all the way under $17, which is about 50% downside roughly from here. Okay, that's not happening. That happened because we had one insane stock market crash, the fastest stock market crash ever there in 2020, but also because they were closing all restaurants around the United States of America. I don't know how many of you guys remember, during that time period, all restaurants were closed. We didn't know if companies like Cheesecake Factory were going to go under, because it's like these were just restaurant chains that literally couldn't even run their business, right? And so there was a real thought during that time period of oh my gosh, all restaurant chains could go out of business, right? And then obviously a lot of these companies pivoted to go food, and then a couple months later they started being able to open up restaurants in at least some capacity and things like that. Okay, so going down to $16-17 isn't happening. The way I kind of view this as max downside for a stock like Cheesecake is maybe 10 to 20%. That's if you get into a bad recessionary scenario and, just their business weakens massively from here, right? So that's the way I view it. Max downside 10 to 20%. Long-term upside, I think, is probably 100% plus. I think this is likely going to $60 to $70 over the next few years. And meanwhile, I get to collect a 3% plus dividend yield on the shares I'm buying now, right? Which, let's be honest, that dividend should get increased quite substantially over the next few years. And the worst of inflation is now behind us. So if anything, I would say they're likely going to be a lot more profitable over this next 12 months than they probably were over the last 12 months, regardless of what happens in the economy. So for a risk reward in this one, it's very attractive. Let's just call it that. When I'm looking at a stock that has long-term upside of 100% plus and downside of maybe 10 to 20% in a bad case scenario with that sort of dividend yield, I'll take that any day of the week. So I'm going to be a big buyer of Cheesecake Factory stock over this next, I would say, basically about the next 6 months or so in regards to this one, okay? Now, I had dinner with a friend recently, okay? And this friend, he was like, why is the market so high? He believes the market's so high, right? And he's like, come on, can't we crash this thing down or something like that, right? And he was basically saying, I have a lot of cash to buy with, but I'm scared to put it in the market right now. Aren't we going to go down, something like that? And he kind of wanted my opinion, right? And two things I have to say to this, okay? I'll tell you the same two things I told him. First off, does he think he's the only one that's cash loaded right now, right? And that was the first point I brought out. Because the fact is, right now, the amount of people I just know personally that are sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash or millions of dollars of cash and are way too cash heavy is a long list, folks. It is a long list. And you say, oh, Jeremy, you must just know rich people or something like that. I'm just telling you, these people are way off sides. They're way heavy on cash right now, okay? And so the problem is, if you have massive amounts of people that are cash heavy, way too cash heavy, eventually people start getting impatient because they're waiting for the drop to happen. They're waiting for the drop to happen. And sooner or later, people are like, damn it, like I got to get in this market. So slowly what you're going to start seeing play out over the coming months, in my opinion, is a lot of these folks on any dips in the market, they're going to start having to buy in and buy in and buy in, or they're going to be left behind, right? And so that's where it gets hard to get a massive dip. Like, why can't we just get the S&P 500 to fall 10, 20%? You need massive amount of sellers, and you need the folks with money on the sideline to not come in, right? It's like, why can't you get LA real estate to fall in a massive way? The reason you can't get LA real estate to fall in a massive way, right, is because at the end of the day, there's so many people with so much money in LA that if real estate prices just drop a little bit, they're ready to pounce like that and buy a real estate investment property or buy a property to remodel it and flip it. There's so many of those people in LA. And so it gets hard to get that market to drop in a substantial way because there's always money just sitting there, right? And so the same exact phenomenon is going on in the market right now where you've got so many people with so much money sitting in treasuries, savings accounts, CD accounts, waiting for this crash to happen, right? Because, oh, the great financial crisis, we fell 50%. Why can't we fall that much now? And they're waiting and they're waiting, and they're going to continue to wait, right? The second reason I think the market's held up relatively well, despite everything that's been thrown at it, is passive investing, right? Because at the end of the day, we got to be honest. Over the past 15 years, so many people have gravitated toward passive investing, where basically they just have a certain amount of their paycheck go into the S&P 500, or they do it themselves, whatever, right? And they're just consistently kind of buying into the market, and they're not worried about selling because they're not retiring anytime soon. So I think that's a big part of this, where people just, put money into the market. And so it always creates this buying pressure, and specifically around the S&P 500 and a lot of the NASDAQ stocks as well, a lot of the NASDAQ 100. And so I think that's another huge component of why you can't get the market down in a massive way. And even if I think about myself, I'm a consistent buyer every single week in the market, and I love it, okay? Every week I buy in the Patreon portfolio. By the way, I'm making my moves in there tomorrow, so if you want to see all the moves I'm making in there tomorrow, check out the pinned comment down there. I'll be making moves in there. Every week I'm buying in the Patreon portfolio. Every week I buy in the public account, which is in the private stock group, right? Every week I'm buying in my dividend portfolio. Every week, okay? And so I think that's one of the big components you have out there is consistent buyers, right? The only difference is between me and maybe a lot of other people is they might just put in an index fund or something like that, where I'm picking actual individual stocks. I'm like, I want to put my money in this stock, this stock, this stock today, right? And so it's just a different mentality than I think a lot of past generations had around, buying in the market, where they thought they had to time it out perfect. And I think we just have gotten smarter a little bit, in some ways as humans. And I think one of those ways is just realizing we're not going to time it. Look at the data. Look at every great investor ever. They are going to tell you they can't time the market despite having 50 years of experience. Warren Buffett's been doing this since, probably since before my parents were born. That man can't time the market. If he can't time the market, who are you to think you can time the market? It doesn't work like that. No one can do that. You can get lucky once or twice, but I'm telling you, try to sell it out of your portfolio and buying back in, it's a fool's game. It's always been a fool's game. No one got on that billionaire list from doing that. I can tell you that much, okay?